I'm absolutely thrilled that the government have actually come to their senses and are implementing this long overdue policy. I mean, all a child needs is a safe, secure, loving home. Bottom line.
And the point about the guidelines we should make clear is that they are very important. I mean, they really do determine how the policies are going to work their way through.
I mean, when my parents were looking to adopt me, they had no idea that race would be a barrier to adoption, and they had to fight for over 2 years, and luckily they had the financial wherewithal and the tenacity to keep going and going and going. Had they not, I would have been in residential care. The bottom line is that ethnic families are not coming forward to adopt, so therefore you have a high majority of ethnic children in care, and we all know a loving home is far better than being in care.
Right. Derrick Campbell, what do you make of the argument?
Well, I don't disagree with what Ben is saying. He's had his personal experience. What my concern is the risk assessment and longitudinal studies when it comes to what happens after that child has been adopted into a culture that's not their base culture, as it were. How do they deal with the realities of life outside? Now, I don't have any issues with Ben's experience. It may be wonderful, but I deal with young people, not just in Wolverhampton, but across the West Midlands and the nation, who suffer psychological problems, particularly one of identity, particularly one of, you know, who they are and how they can actually deal with some of the issues that they face in life.
But would you have, as a starting point, the belief that adoption, the absorption into a family, is usually a better solution than a life in care? Or would you use that as a starting point?
I would have no problem whatsoever in standing up and saying a child being brought up in a loving environment is really important, and I'm not challenging that, because I wouldn't challenge that. I would just make the distinction.
So isn't that, I'll ask Ben Douglas to come back in a minute, but isn't that something that outweighs, the difficulties which I think anybody realised might arise from a child from, let's say, an Afro-Caribbean background who's adopted into a white family and perhaps in the teenage years has an identity difficulty? People would understand that's a possibility. But is that a bigger problem than the problem of a life in care?
I think it's a bit wider than that. We're looking at finite points here, i.e., the way a child is brought up in a loving environment compared to how they deal with life later on. And I think we need to be clear about the wider implications of this. We're looking at a person's culture, a person's heritage, and whether we like it or not, if you're brought up as a black child in your example in a white family, yes, you may have love and be cared for, etc. There's no argument with that. The problem comes with what happens as we go through life to our culture and our heritage, and how is that maintained and sustained.
I really have got to come back to you on that, because I completely disagree with really pretty much 100% of what you're saying. Firstly, I have been brought up in England. That is my culture. It would be ridiculous for me to be running around in tribal gear and trying to cook over an open fire. It would be absolute nonsense.
Well, I'm going to challenge you, because please don't stigmatise black people as being in grass skirts cooking over an open fire. That's
I was just using an example. I'm not stigmatising.
Well, you're using an example, because that's the wrong example to use. Because black people don't walk around.
I'm a black person myself, so it's not offensive. It's not offensive to me.
It's offensive to me because it's out of order.
Okay, stay calm. My point is this. With all these kind of making differences between people lead to half the problems that we have in the world today. From the 7/7 bombings, all of these issues are about by saying, you're black, you're different, you're Indian, you're different, you've got red hair, you're different. It's absolute nonsense and rubbish. Every child deserves to have a loving, stable, nurturing environment. As you then grow up and go throughout the kind of navigate through life, you have to live your life to the best of your abilities. My parents always told me to go out there and do the best and be the best person that I could be, irregardless of my race, religion, creed, colour, or anything on those levels. It's about being a decent human being, and that has nothing to do with being in a white family or black family or race.
Derrick Campbell?
I think we're non-sequitur here. We're talking about two totally different things. I have made it very clear, when it comes to bringing up a child in a loving environment, that is absolutely fine. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a person's identity and culture.
But what is someone's identity and culture? What is my culture? My culture is English.
When we
what
talk
what
about
should be my culture?
we talk about heritage, we talk about history. For example, you're talking from what I can hear as a person who perhaps has never experienced racism and its nuances, who's never understood how to deal
I
with
have.
it.
No, listen to me. I have.
You know, and we talk about
Okay, you're saying that you made a point, and you're letting me come back on it. You said that I've never experienced racism. I have, and I just think people who make sort of racist comments and judge people on the colour of their skin are ignorant.
Well, they probably are ignorant, but the point is, a person still needs to deal with it. And you're talking as if you live in a utopian society where everybody gets on with each other. The reality of it is, there's a lot of people from whatever background they are who are treated different simply because of their ethnicity and race. And we need to ensure that
what a sad way to live.
Hang on. The impact on that individual's psychological well-being is managed and catered for. And this is just a perspective that's
do you get paid?
just needs to be clear about that.